And the finalists for the Landcare Australia Local Government Award are from the Australian Capital Territory, the bush-friendly...
In Australia, environmental trophies don't come much bigger than the National Landcare Awards. This year, 7 farmers with 148 years of farming experience between them were in the running for the coveted Primary Producer Award.
Minister, the winner, please.
Winner is Andrew Nichols from Tasmania.
Andrew and Carolyn Nichols run a mixed farm on the northwest coast of Tasmania, and they've been carrying out landcare work for 20 years, trying to combine production with conservation, profits with preservation.
We still have a chance in Tassie to keep ourselves unique, but only if we fence off these remnant areas of bush, and only if we make sure that we go through time with all these creatures along with us. If you don't get a thrill when you see a wedge-tailed eagle or a flock of black cockatoos flying over, then you're taking living in this wonderful country very much for granted. Thank you.
When Andrew and Carolyn Nichols emigrated from England to Tasmania in 1982, they were taken aback by the amount of native bush still left.
You have some wild areas left, which is unlike England, where less than 1% of England is still native vegetation. So it hits you when you get here. Over the next hill is not another suburb or a town. It's still got some wildness about it.
4 years after moving to Tasmania, the Nichols bought the 380-hectare farm Redbanks at Sisters Creek. It had 80 hectares of native bush and a stream that was home to the rare giant Tasmanian freshwater crayfish. But rather than clear what they could, the couple decided to leave the bush alone and only farm the land already cleared. Do you think the farmers here appreciate it, farmers that haven't seen England and Europe?
Those that haven't seen England and Europe, probably not. No, I guess there are plenty of farmers here who do appreciate it, but there are certainly a fair number that take it for granted.
Andrew Nichols puts his appreciation for wildlife and his desire to protect its habitat down to his grandfather.
He was a farm worker in Great Britain, and when I grew up in Britain he used to take me around the hedgerows and show me all the native English birds which were in decline, and which incidentally are still in decline, and I guess I grew to love them through him.
On their cleared land, the Nichols grow cereal crops, poppies, broccoli, potatoes, peas and onions. They also run beef cattle and raise chickens for both egg and meat production. Despite the huge workload, they've never forgotten their commitment to the wild areas on their farm and the birds and animals that live there. Fencing was one of the first things they did.
Yes, we have. We've done revegetation work along creeks. We've fenced off existing remnant bush along creeks. We've formed wildlife corridors which radiate out from the national park in several directions along creeks. So yes, we've used fencing for all of those reasons here.
The fence lines are there as a management tool. So they're all placed there so that weed control can still occur, so that fire management can still occur, so that grazing, when it's necessary, can still occur. So it's not, it's an integrated way of fencing vegetation, and I think that's one of the reasons he won the award.
Greening Australia helped with the cost of fencing, agreeing with Andrew that it was not only critically important to keep stock away from streams and out of native vegetation, but to manage the abundant wildlife.
He's used game-proof fencing across his property to stop wallabies going into the productive area, and what that does is allows him to manage his wildlife areas for wildlife and for habitat, and his pasture for the cows to eat it, not the wallabies.
Despite focusing on protecting and conserving the natural bush they have, tree planting is also part of the farm's landcare plan.
We've done a fair amount of tree planting, some of it for commercial reasons. You can see, again behind us, you can see a pine plantation being managed. On some of the land we've used funds from Greening Australia and ourselves to plant, to replant native vegetation as well. But the easiest way to conserve wildlife on Tasmanian farms, those who've got it, is to fence off remnant bush, because the species from the locality are in that bush, not only plants and also the insects and the birds. So it's a very easy thing to do if you have the attitude, and the whole thing is attitude.
And according to Landcare's Jodie Epper, having a long-term view. She says Redbanks is a great example of what can happen when a farmer with vision takes the long view.
So they have a vision about where they want that farm to go in 20 years' time. The North West Coast is unique in Tasmania. It is very highly productive land, and they have managed proportionally to put aside a huge amount of land in comparison to mainland farmers, for example.
Yeah, there's been a lot of opposition at times with people around the area, but they do have a lot of respect for us because they know how hard we work, and our passion is, to leave something for the next generation.
When the Nichols arrived in 1986, this bank was degraded and full of bracken ferns. Eucalypts were planted to stabilise it and to provide a timber harvest in 18 years' time. Those trees have just been felled.
And now we're rehabilitating the site, getting rid of the blackberries from around the edges, and we're going to replant it with conservation in mind.
So will this be a haven for birds?
I do hope so. Yes, that's what we're aiming for.
Last year I built a big dam for him, and when I'd nearly completed the dam, he actually asked me to make an island in the middle of a dam for the wildlife and the birds to live on as a sanctuary. Very unusual. Yeah, it's fun working for Andrew.
Well, he was definitely there again.
The love of birds that Andrew inherited from his grandfather has made it to the next generation. 11-year-old Emma Nichols often goes bird watching with her dad. So birds are always uppermost in your mind then?
Yes. Yes, they are, definitely. I mean, I've guessed, again, from my grandfather, birds are the thing I know, and I can identify birds from sound and sight, but I appreciate the fact that within the bush there's a whole range of plants, funguses and bacteria and all that works, which we're doing our bit to conserve.
The bush the Nichols have protected is home to the endangered giant Tasmanian freshwater crayfish. For the family, it's a big thrill just knowing they're there.
Down here, thankfully, but
the crayfish can be sure that the stream sides won't be cleared for forestry or farming, and stock won't be allowed to trample the banks and affect water quality.
Let him go, Emma?
Yeah.
Okay, off he goes. Hopefully. Oh, he's not very keen to get away.
Despite all the work they've done at Redbanks, the Nichols decided to take their Landcare endeavours one step further. They bought a block of bush next door and placed a covenant on it.
60 acres of bush in there it's still got tall hollow trees, it's still got the timber in the creek where the lobsters can live, and there's actually a wedge-tail's nest in the middle of it as well, so it's a beautiful wild piece of bush.
Tell us what a covenant does.
A covenant essentially protects a piece of area from use. We are signing away the use of it even for firewood. We can't even go in there and pick firewood, so we are, in a way, we're losing from a productive point of view, but we believe we're gaining from a feel-good point of view.
What do you feel when you walk through there?
Awe, absolutely awe. It's very beautiful. There are still hollow trees. It takes over 100 years for a hollow in a tree to be big enough for an owl or a parrot to nest in. So it's obviously you're never going to get hollows in trees in plantation forests or any of the production forests. So we need areas like that with a full range of plants and animals to be left within the landscape.
Mrs Nichols predicts the family will buy even more bush in coming years.
And I think consumers are looking very much so at where their food is coming from, and if they know that the food they're buying are from farmers that are actually doing the right thing with conservation, I think that's going to be a big consumer push in the next few years, and people who aren't doing the right thing won't be supplying the companies because they'll be dictated to by what the consumer is saying we want in our supermarkets.
If this is the case, then the Nichols will be ready. For on their cropping and grazing land, they also apply sustainable farming principles. The chook poo, of which they have plenty, goes back out onto the paddocks. And what's going on in this paddock is designed to reduce soil erosion in winter when heavy rain can wash soil away.
Yes, we're installing ripper mulch lines. So it's a soil erosion control method. Basically, we put a rip line with a straw layer across the paddocks on the contour, and that just helps slow water that runs off the paddock and helps infiltration and catches sediment, just to try and prevent soil erosion on these steeper paddocks.
They have groundbreaking techniques in the way they till the soil, in the way they manage their soil, in the way they rotate their crops so that they don't lose any of their soil. It's very steep land on the North West Coast. Their property is quite steep. Their soil is very, very precious, and they manage it brilliantly.
The drive that's seen the Nichols achieve so much in 20 years is evident in another aspect of their operation that Caroline started 10 years ago. She started making chicken pies, hundreds of them.
So then I thought I needed another business that I not totally reliant on chicken meat, so I then went into my Christmas puddings, fruit cakes, and it's just grown from there. So yes, we use a lot of eggs.
Business has boomed, and the farm's commercial kitchen now turns out Christmas puddings, fruit cakes, pork pies, pasties, biscuits, jams, chutneys and stuffing mixes, which are sold to delis and department stores on the mainland. But even in the kitchen, Landcare is still paramount.
We're trying to do the right thing with conservation, and this is something that is one of our big selling points with our fruit cakes and puddings, is that there's a little inset on the packaging that tells us about the farm and how we're trying to do conservation, and proceeds go to wildlife conservation for the farm.
Andrew and Carolyn Nichols say taking home the national award vindicates the time and money they've put into Redbanks in the last 20 years.
I would just hope if it just changed one farmer's opinion and just got him to just lock up just an acre of his land that was just native bush, that to me would be the great thing that could have happened.
Please fence it off, and please, when you're going there with a chainsaw to cut firewood, don't take that old tree with all the hollows in. Just think about what might be living in it. Just set some. Not all of your farm has to be productive. You've got to leave some bits that aren't, to keep the place unique and different, and there's still a chance to do it.